welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing part 2 of my 4-part depression series, which I'm calling Let's Talk About It. So that's what the LTAI in the name stands for. So today in part 2 I'll be covering my last depressive phase. If you missed part 1, I'll link it down in the description, but today I'll be talking about the past year. So, where I left off, I was working as a project manager and things were alright. I liked my job and I liked my coworkers, but I felt like little things were getting to me. I felt like things that I could usually just forget about were now stressing me out a lot. I mean, there's stress and then there's stress. There's good stress and then there's stress that makes you feel really anxious. So I was feeling that every situation was becoming anxious stress and bad stress, and I wasn't feeling the motivational part of it anymore, and that I was just constantly dreading a new email coming in because I thought, oh, what's gonna happen now, and just taking things very personally, even if they weren't. To the point where I felt, okay, this is getting out of hand, and these patterns was the first time I had a panic attack again since I moved to Germany. That was, I believe, November 2017. I was out with a friend and we had dinner and I was gonna go home afterwards. My boyfriend wasn't home, so I started looking for my keys before we left the restaurant and I couldn't find them. So then I got really nervous and I got really panicked, and then I went back to work to see if I'd forgotten them in my office. Once I realized they weren't there, I had the first panic attack I had in 3 years. I was on the floor in my office having a panic attack, and I felt like, how did I not see this coming? How did I not pick up on the signs? My sister and her boyfriend came to pick me up, and I think I didn't go to work the day after, but that was me noticing something's going on again, and it's gonna be one cat interruption in every video because otherwise it won't be fun. That's when I realized I was returning to old patterns and that I needed to do something about it. So I went to my doctor here, and he prescribed me antidepressants and medication for my anxiety as well. This was a time that was close to Christmas, so I already had vacation booked for 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks were very challenging. I remember crying at Christmas while I was opening my presents just because I was so overwhelmed by everything. And it wasn't even negative things. I love Christmas. There I was at Christmas Eve crying because of nothing, basically. So after all of this, I tried to be a bit more mindful. I tried to take care of myself a bit more. But I also felt the medications having side effects. I was very dizzy in the morning. I got a very dry mouth, and I now know that I think about 90% of people, or maybe even more, who take antidepressants get that kind of a weird cotton mouth, kind of like really dry mouth. The dizziness was the worst for me. And so on top of feeling mentally unwell, I was also feeling physically unwell, and that was just making it really, really difficult for me. So I know I spent another month going to work quite regularly. Once I got my sick note, I made an appointment. In Germany, you can get an appointment with a therapist because it's really difficult to get appointments with therapists. Usually you have to wait a month or 2, maybe even 3. This is kind of the first evaluation where you have an hour to talk with them. They see what your issues are, what your problems are. It's not there to serve a diagnosis because they're not taking that time, but more to see what kind of therapy would you benefit from. So I did this, and it was in April, the end of April, and one of the options that was given to me at the end of this was a stay in a mental institution, a mental ward. And once I heard that, I thought, okay, I'm really not feeling well, and maybe this is something that can help me with it. So I went home and I discussed it with my boyfriend, and that afternoon we decided that that would probably be what I would be doing. So we decided to call the institution the next day to make an appointment. But the same evening I actually had a really bad panic attack which lasted for 3 hours, and my boyfriend did in fact take me then to the mental institution that we were going to contact. And then there we had a chat with the resident doctor, which had the night shift on that day. And they actually admitted me as an emergency patient the same night. I was lucky there was a bed empty in a room, because usually in these kind of situations as well, you'll be on a waiting list and you'll have to wait until there's an empty spot. I was admitted as an emergency patient then and there, so I actually spent that night there already. The next morning I woke up feeling very interesting. I was given medication for me to get rid of the stress because I was very tensed up, obviously, the night before. And so when I woke up I was very stiff everywhere, that's all I remember, and just emotionally very numb. So I spent 2 months stationary in total. I would have a weekly plan, a weekly calendar, where, you know, you'd have your breakfast times, then activities and therapies throughout the day, lunch, and then dinner, and then, you know, the rest of the day you could decide how you would fill that. I'm just gonna touch on my time in therapy in this video, because otherwise it's gonna be like a 30-minute video and I won't put you through that. So I'm just gonna slightly cover the main topics, and then in my next video I'll go into more detail what a day or a month or 2 in a mental institution looks like. So I spent 8 weeks there in total. In my second to last week there, I got an interview, I'll call it that for lack of a better word for it, at the day clinic, because you go there and they talk to you and they see if the day clinic is a good choice for you, and then also there's 3 different groups in the one that I was, to see which group you'd fit into most. So then 2 weeks after I got out of the mental ward, I went to the day clinic for another 8 weeks. I would go there in the morning, come back home in the evening. So that was the main difference, that, you know, you're still at home, you still have that kind of like structured life, but you're obviously not going to work or anything, but then you're going to day-to-day therapy as well. And I think you can think about it in a sense that the mental ward is more of a emergency situation that they help you get out of that low you're in, whereas the day clinic is then to build up on those things to help you reintegrate into day-to-day situations and learn how to be a bit more responsible again, so that you get out of that mentality of I can't do much. Because obviously there's a lot of people who, like myself, I was afraid to go shopping, I couldn't leave the house alone, I could barely leave my bed. So that's how I look at those 2 separate institutions in a way. I think I definitely learned a lot in those 4 months, and coming out I felt like a totally different person. That was my last year. In the next video I'll dive into the specifics of each institution, so the mental ward and the day clinic, and explain a bit what each one entailed and what the biggest differences are. Yeah, so stick around if you want to catch that next week, and thanks for dropping by. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.